Hey guys, Rob Tactical Garage here. Today I was going to do a video and show you how I am doing partial throttle MAF only tuning. So MAF only tuning, partial throttle tuning on my 2016 Camaro SS. A couple things to start. The assumption here is that you know how to use HP tuners, you know how to download and upload tunes from your vehicle using HP tuners, and that you also know how to log data in HP tuners. A little bit of a disclaimer here, this is how I do it. I'm not necessarily suggesting you should do it this way. There's other information available online, whether that be videos or HP tuner forums or other avenues where you can get various ideas on how you can tune your vehicle. If you choose to use some of the information that I'm showing you today, that's your choice. And if you have a problem with your tune, I'm not responsible for that. That is your own decision. So from there we'll move on. We'll talk about the process that I'm using here. So at this point you've downloaded your tune from your vehicle into HP tuners here, and here would be the base tune that you'd be starting with. Before we start logging data, we need to make a few changes in the tune to be able to log the data, and then we're going to have to change those back before we go into wide open throttle at all. So this tune right here, once you load this is partial throttle only, no wide open throttle at all. It could damage your vehicle. So we're going to start with that, and we'll walk through the process here. So first thing we're going to want to do is go into engine here. So we'll click on engine, and let's go. We'll start in fuel. So engine, fuel. I'm going to go to the lean fuel savings here, and we have our displacement on demand, and you want to make sure that this is disabled. For me, this is a permanent setting in my tune. I always have this disabled. I'm more concerned about performance and gas mileage, so this is always disabled. If you want, you can re-enable this when you're done, but again, that's your choice. The next thing we're going to want to go into is the temperature control here. So under temperature control, you have your cat over temperature, catalyst over temperature disabled here. So if yours is enabled here, you need to change this to disabled. Again, this is something that's a permanent setting in my tune. I always have this disabled. But if you want to protect your catalytic converter, you would have this enabled. So you can change this back if you want, but you need to at least temporarily disable it. Next thing I'm going to go into here is I will go into power enrichment here. So we're going to go into power enrichment right here, and we're going to go down to throttle. So enable pedal right here. So this is the percentage or the pedal position when the vehicle goes into power enrichment mode. For this particular tuning, we do not want the vehicle to go into power enrichment mode, so what we're going to do is we're going to set all these at 100. But if I was to go into wide open throttle with these settings at 100 and the vehicle is not able to go into power enrichment mode, it's very dangerous for the vehicle. So no wide open throttle while you have this change in your vehicle. So this is only a temporary setting here, and we have to convert these back to these values right here. So what you're going to want to do is we'll want to copy these values so we can paste these back in when we're done. So we'll click on that, left click, right click, we're going to go ahead and copy those, and I'm going to paste them into Excel so I know what the values are. So we'll paste those into Excel for later because we'll need those later to change those back. But temporarily what we're going to do is we're going to change these all to 100. So 100 in the box here equals, it'll change all of them to 100. We're done there. Next thing I'm going to go into is we're going to go into the cutoff. So our deceleration fuel cutoff is what we're looking at here. We want to find this. We want to go to where they enable ECT here. So we'll click on this. And essentially, if the air intake temperature is above this right here, then it allows the vehicle to cut off fuel upon deceleration of the vehicle. We do not want that to happen during this tuning, so we're going to have to override this temporarily. Again, these are values that you're going to want to copy, so we're going to copy these values because you want to change these back. So we'll copy these. I'm going to paste them into Excel here, so we'll set them in Excel. We're going to come back into our tune, and we want to increase these values to a level that the air intake temperature will not get to. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and set these at 350. So 350 here equals. Again, these have to be changed back when we're done with this process, and we should not be going into wide open throttle tuning or wide open throttle during this process. So We've changed those. The last thing we're going to want to look at here is we're going to want to go to airflow. So we're going to go to airflow here, engine, make sure engine, airflow right here. We're going to want to go to dynamic tab right here. We're going to want to find this dynamic airflow right here. And we're going to be looking at this right here. So it's the high RPM disable and the high RPM re-enable. So what this is saying right now is that the VE tuning is disabled if it gets above this 1200 RPMs. The stock value on this is probably around 4,000. So let's say the stock value is 4,000. I have mine set at my tune at 1200 right now, but right now we're going to be tuning from idle up to 4,000 RPMs, and we want to tune in MAF only tuning. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make this lower, this RPM lower than what our current idle is. My idle set around 600. So I'm going to put this in something lower. So I'm going to set it at 400 here. And then the next one, so I'm going to come down to this right here, and this should be about 50 lower than that one. So it could be 300 or 350. Let's just do 350. So what this effectively does is that the vehicle is no longer going to be using VE tuning above this RPM. So effectively the vehicle is going to be relying on MAF only tuning for determining the fuel that it's going to be giving the vehicle. And you're able to do this because in the Gen 5 is a virtual VE. And so the virtual VE allows you to tune in MAF only. For most vehicles, this will work. For some vehicles with a large cam or something like that, you would need to do VE only. But for most vehicles, you should be able to just use MAF only tuning. And so that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. And we will not be changing these values back. We will be leaving these values where they're at. So at this point, we've got all of the changes done in our tune that we need. And so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to save this tune. So file, save as. In my case, it's a 3.5 poly that I'm using, and it's a partial MAF tuning. The base one was the first one I downloaded, so that was the base tune. I'm going to call this number 1 because it's the first adjusted tune that I'm using. So at this point, what you do is you would load this tune into your vehicle. So this is the tune that you want to use for partial throttle tuning only. So partial throttle only at this point. And then we're going to go into our scanner, and we're going to do a setup in our scanner and make sure we have the data or the logs that we need in our scanner. So the two channels you have to make sure you're logging at this point is you have to make sure you're logging your MAF sensor in frequency or in hertz right here. So MAF hertz, and that is over, you're going to be seeing that right over here. So you need to make sure it's in your channel. I'm assuming you know how to do this. Right click, find it, and make sure you're logging it. So you have to be logging this. The other thing that you have to be logging for this particular tuning is you also have to be logging your long-term fuel trim. So that's the other one that you have to make sure you're logging. So verify you're logging both of those to start. Next thing we should do is we need to go to a graph, and we need to create a graph for tuning. So we'll go to graph right now. We're going to click, we'll click on that temporarily. We'll right click, we're going to go into graph layout, and we're going to set up a new graph now. So we're going to come to add graph here, add table, and so we have a new table here. And what we're going to want to be logging here is the long-term fuel trim. So we're going to click this, and we're going to look for long-term fuel trims. We'll type that in. So what you'll notice is probably for your vehicle specific one, there's a bank 1 and bank 2 for this. And what we want to do is we want to be logging a combination of both of those banks. So to find that, if you come down here further, under the generic sensors, you should see one that just says long-term fuel trim here. It doesn't say bank 1 or 2. It just says long-term fuel trim. So that's the one we want. So we'll click on that. It'll bring it in here. So we have our long-term fuel trim sensor here that we want. The units we're going to be wanting to do is percentages. So we click on percentage here. We want to make sure we have average over here in the view. Decimals can be 1 or 2. I'm just going to use 1. So then your cell hits right here. We're going to do 5 here, so we'll require at least 5 cell hits here. And then for our column access, what we're going to want for our column access is our MAF sensors. So we're going to click on this right here. We're going to type in mass airflow. So we want our mass airflow sensor, and we want it in frequency. So mass airflow sensor frequency. it'll bring it up. It's going to tell us, do you want to use the generic one instead of the vehicle specific one? Mass airflow frequency. Yes, that sounds good. We'll take that. And so now our column access is set up for mass airflow frequency sensor. Next thing we're going to do right here is we need to get the values. So we need to get our column values, and we want to have this match the column values that are in our tune. So to do that, we're going to go back into our tune here. We'll go to Engine. We're going to go to Airflow. We're going to go to General. And under that, you should find this MAF calibration. Under that, there should be an airflow versus frequency here. We'll click on that. And the column values we want are the column values that are right along top here. So we want this to match what's in our table. So we'll click on this. We'll right click. We're going to just go down to column access, and we're going to copy the labels. So we copied the labels here. Go back into our graph at this point, and we'll just paste those in. So Control V, those are in there. So now the columns here match the columns in your tune, and we should be good. I will change the name right here. I'm going to call this something like MAF long-term fuel trim tuning, whatever you want to call it. So I'll call it that. You could save it right at this point. It's in here right now, so we should be good, but you could save either just the selected graph, or you could save all the graphs. But we're going to click here now. We're going to close this, and we're going to just want to make sure that our table is here. So we should be good here. And it's set at averages here, values, so average values, and we should be good. So at this point, we're going to go to the vehicle, and we're going to do some logging of the vehicle. So let's break away. We'll go do that, and then we'll come back. Okay guys, now we're in the vehicle. We're getting ready to connect into the VCM scanner here and start scanning the data that we need for the partial throttle tuning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to click on the connect to vehicle. So I'll connect to the vehicle. The vehicle's running at this point. We're going to connect to the vehicle, pulling everything up. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on you can click it here, vehicle, and then go to the control and special functions. So we'll click on that, and we're under engine. Then we're going to go over and find fuel, and then we're going to reset the long-term fuel trim. So this should reset your long-term fuel trims to 0. So we will be logging a fresh set of data. So I'm going to click long-term fuel trim reset there, and we are good there. So at this point, we're going to start to scan. And so we'll start scanning now. And what we should see here. So at this point, we want to make sure that we are logging the mass airflow sensor here, and also our long-term fuel trims here as well. And so at this point, what we're going to want to do is, first we would want to log idle. So we would sit here and we would idle for a couple minutes. So we want to idle for a couple minutes. And then after we've logged the idle for a period of time, the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take the vehicle out. And ideally we would be on a road that that doesn't have a lot of stop signs or stop lights or anything, something that we can log some data without stopping. So essentially where we want to log from is idle, which we're doing right now, and then we're going to want to log data up to essentially 4,000 RPMs. And the way that you can do that is, let's say we can get on a road that we can go a reasonable speed on, that's not too fast, and we're just going to log data, and we're going to hold it at different RPMs. So we might hold it at 1500 RPM. So let's say we just lock it in second gear, for example, and we're in second gear. We hold it at 1500 RPMs for 10 seconds. We move up to 2000 RPMs, hold it there for 10 seconds or so, go up to 2500 RPMs. So keep going up 500 RPMs and just hold it there for around 5 to 10 seconds, and move it all the way up to 4000 RPMs. And then after you held each one of those 500 increments, and then we just do some gradual increases in the throttle. So from 1500 RPMs up to 4000 RPMs. Again, no wide open throttles at all. This is just gradual increases, and let it come back down, gradual increases. After logging all that data, we should have what we need, and at that point we would reset, we would we're going to assume that we've gone out and done that and come back with the log data, and we'll go back and I'll show you what to do with that data. Okay, now that we've logged our data, so we went to the vehicle, we logged the data, we have our information back, and this one right here is the log that I had done earlier. So here's the log I had done earlier, and it has populated the graph at this point. So our graph is populated at this point, and you can see in the partial throttle tuning here, it's logged mass airflow frequency from 2100 here. So it's logged from 2100 up to, let's see, so it's between 2100 and 5100 is the data we've logged. And what this data is showing us is it's showing us the long-term fuel trims, the average long-term fuel trim for each of these various mass airflow frequencies right here. So in this case right here at 4500, it's a negative 5.9. So that tells me that the long-term fuel trims are removing 5.9% of the fuel on average at this particular frequency. And generally, you're going to want to make sure that these values are lower than 5. You know, you could keep working these values to bring them down further and further. In this case, I'm primarily below 5. Let's say we're trying to get these below 3, for example. So what we'd want to do is we'd want to copy these values and paste them into our tune. So at this point, we would come here. We're going to click on this, left click, right click. We're going to copy these values right here, and then we're going to go back into our tune at this point. So now we've gone into our tune, and again we're back in that same spot we were before. So just to make sure, I'll start from the beginning. So we're going to go to engine, we're going to go to airflow, we're going to go to general, and we're going to bring up the airflow versus frequency table here, and we'll expand this out. I like to see the split screen here, which is this little button right here, so that would be only the graph. But if you want to see the split screen, you can click on that. And so what we would do right here now is we're going to click in the upper corner here. It's going to highlight everything, and then we're going to right click, and we are going to go to paste special here. So if you're far away, you would multiply by percentage. So before we had seen that where basically at, I think it was, let's say at 5,000 hertz, it was showing a negative 5.9. So you can either decrease these values by 5.9 if you were going to do multiply by percentage here, or if you wanted to do half of 5.9, which is just under 3%, it would lower them by 3%. And what we're going to see here is the values are only going to change from 2100 up to that 5000 or 5100 that we were seeing. So in this case, we'll say 2100 is at 29 right now. And so that should get lowered. So we should see that lower once we do that. So again, we'll come back here. We're highlighting all of them. We're going to right click. I'm going to paste special. I'm going to multiply by the full percentage here just to have you see more of effect here. So we'll multiply by that. And so what's happened here now is that it has lowered the values for the ones that was in our graph. So 2100 here was at 29, and now it's at 26, so that's been lowered. If you come across here now, you can see that the green ones have not changed. So the value at 1950, that stayed exactly the same. But the values all the way up to 5100, which was from our graph, have all changed. And so those have been changed. So what you would do at this point is first you want to make sure there was nothing crazy in here. So if for some reason you had some kind of, we're going to come down to where we're at here. So if you had some kind of crazy spike or something like that, you're not going to want that crazy spike there. So if you have that situation, what you could do is you would highlight the cell before it, so shift, and highlight the cell itself that's got the weird value in it, and then highlight the cell afterwards so you have all three cells here. At this point, we're going to click on this, interpolate between horizontal bounds, and then it's going to put an average. It's going to change this right here, so that'll smooth it out. So right there, so we're good. So if you have any of those, clean those up. And then at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to save this tune, And so we'll go File, Save As. And so this is our second adjustment here. So we're going to go back into here. We're going to adjust it. And we're going to save this tune. So at this point, what you would do is you would re-upload this tune to your vehicle. You'd go through the same logging process that you went through previously. And you would check your logs. And when you get to the point, so if we go back to our logs here, when you get to the point that these logs are kind of at the ranges you want, then you're done. So in this case, I'm probably a little bit higher than I want. I want to make sure I'm certainly below 5 and I'm a little above 5. So I would relog. But if I was seeing, for example, if I was seeing everything was around 3.1 or something like that, then I would probably call it good and I would stop the process there. But let's assume that you logged it again and everything's below 3 and you're good with it. And then at that point, you're essentially done. But what you're going to want to do is you have to make sure you change back some of those values we changed earlier before you call this thing final. So we're going to go back. We're going to make sure that we change back. So we're going to go to fuel savings right here. We're going to go into power enrichment. And this enable pedal right here, you recall these, we changed all these to 100, and we cannot leave these at 100. They have to be changed back. So they were all previously, we changed them all to 100, but we want to enable power enrichment. So to do that, we're going to come back and we're going to take the values that we had previously copied. So these are the original values, however you did that. I would copy these values. I would come back into my tune. I'm going to go back to my tune here. And I'm going to paste them now. So I'll right click and I'm just going to paste. So now it's updated all these values. Now they're at 50, 46, 35, so forth. So these have been changed. So that's critical. This has to be done. So we've done this right now. So the other thing we have to change back is we have to go into the fuel cutoff here. So deceleration fuel cutoff. So we'll go into cutoffs, the deceleration fuel cutoff here, enable ECT right here. So we had changed all these values to 350, but we do not want these values at 350. We want those at the values we had before, which were 86, but we can confirm that. So I would just copy these values, copy, and then I would come back into the tune here, and I'll highlight them, and I'll paste. So these are changed back to 86. So this is what we want right here. So these are the ones that have to be changed back. So these ones have to be changed back. We've changed those back. If you recall, the other things that we changed, we also disabled the cat over temperature. This is not a mandatory one. I leave this disabled. You could re-enable this if you want. The other one is this lean fuel saving, so displacement on demand. We had changed this to disabled. You can change this back to enabled if you want. Again, I do not. And the last thing is an airflow here. So under dynamic airflow, so we're forcing the vehicle to use MAF only tuning now above these RPMs right here. The problem with increasing these back up again is it would throw the tune off that you just did, because the vehicle would start to use VE tuning in addition to MAF tuning. And in this case, we want to make sure we want to use MAF only tuning because that's what we just tuned for. So we would leave these the same. So I would leave these the same. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to come in here. We're going to want to save this one. So we'll save this one as final. I'm going to save it as final. Save. And before we upload this into our cart, we just want to verify and double check, make sure. So I'm going to go back in here now that we've saved it. I'm going to go back in, I'm going to look at my fuel, I'm going to look at power enrichment here. I'm going to go to this enable pedal right here. I'm going to make sure these are not 100% anymore. Okay, so yep, so the values that we pasted in here have stuck. We're good here. And the other thing I'm going to want to make sure of is that my fuel cutoff, that's still correct. So deceleration fuel cutoff, we had changed these back to 86. We'll click here. Yes, those are 86. So we verified the two most important things at this point, and the tune is saved. Now we would take this tune and we would load this tune into our vehicle, and this is our final tune. We are done with partial throttle tuning, MAF only tuning at this point. So guys, as always, if this was helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, be sure to share the videos. That's probably an important thing. Also, make sure you subscribe. I think we're just under 1,000 subscribers right now. Once we get to 1,000, then YouTube will actually start paying me a few pennies for the videos I post. To date, YouTube has paid me exactly 0. So if we want to start to continue the channel and grow the channel, then we have to get over 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, be sure to do that. If you know other people that are watching some of these videos that aren't subscribing, harass them, tell them to subscribe. So as always, thanks guys.